What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. It has been a long time since I've said that. I've been looking forward to this moment of being able to say that again. It's been a busy time. Honestly, there hasn't been a ton to talk about in college football. I mean, there always is with the transfer portal, but I know the last video I made was a roundup of the season. So today, I'm back. I'm bringing you guys what I'm calling the biggest or highest impact transfers video, specifically geared around this week and next week, which is kind of the culmination of spring practices and these spring games or spring festivals or whatever they're called nowadays. Spring practice is really a glorified practice or a scrimmage, which is always kind of what the spring game was, but it's definitely a little bit less impactful now. But we're still getting a chance in these spring practices. You know, if you're following along with your local team, or the team that you've grown up or support, or maybe went to school, you know, you're probably following up with your local publication. They're going to bring you a lot more detail, but I want to kind of give the bigger national picture. And then as we get kind of further into the summer, kind of start narrowing down that focus. But again, in this video, going to be all about the transfers who have come in. You know, at this point, it's pretty finalized. You know, there's no more transfer window happening. So this is what we've got for spring at least. And what I want to do is I want to go over the top impact transfers. And I think number one is probably Sam Levitt, but I'll talk about him later because he's obviously been out for spring practice and will be after that Lisfranc surgery, I think is how you say it. So I'm going to be going over the guys that, for the most part, we're getting a chance to see. I think that starts with Cam Coleman, the wide receiver making the move from Auburn to Texas. He had 93 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 13 touchdowns in 2 seasons on the Plains. Their spring game will be this Saturday. I think time is still TBA according to FBS schedules. But the questions that I think are going to be necessary for Cam to answer is, how does the connection with Arch Manning look? Can it turn around the Longhorns' offensive inconsistencies? This was an offense that scored just 7 points at Ohio State, 21 points at Florida in a loss, 16 points at Kentucky, and 10 points at Georgia. Now, Ohio State and Georgia, there's a little bit of an asterisk there because it's a road game, really tough environment, young quarterback. But those games against Florida and Kentucky, yes, again, hostile environment, especially at the Swamp. But that's something I think that's going to need to be addressed. And Arch had wide receivers around him, but I don't know if he quite had a wide receiver to this caliber last year. I think Cam Coleman is going to be the best guy that he's worked with so far. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see how Coleman pairs with Ryan Wingo and with Emmett Mosley V. I also have my eyes on running back Hollywood Smothers. He's coming in from North Carolina State. I think that's another addition, especially with Trey Wisner hitting the portal and going elsewhere, that can help this Texas offense. I think the biggest question to me, though, for Texas going into the 2026 season is, can Arch Manning play better on the road? Next up, this is a trio of transfers. I'm going to group them all into one because I think there's a chance to be highly impactful at a Power 4 school. That's quarterback Drew Mestemaker, running back Caleb Hawkins, and wide receiver Wyatt Young. Each of those 3 guys are going from North Texas, where they excelled at a high level, to Oklahoma State, which just went through its worst season since 1991. The Cowboys were 1-11. Their spring game will be April 18th, this Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So each of these guys are going north from Denton, Texas to Stillwater, Oklahoma with their head coach, Eric Morris. So the question is, can they cut it in the Big 12, which is obviously a small or even large step up? It's not as big as going from the Big 10, from a group of 5 conference to a Big 10 or SEC team, but it's still a large step up. So can they cut it in the Big 12, and can they turn around this OSU program? Mestemaker threw for almost 4,400 yards, 34 touchdowns, just 9 interceptions. Hawkins was a 1,400-yard back with 29 total touchdowns, 25 on the ground, and he also added 370 receiving yards. And then Young, it's going to be big for Mestemaker to bring probably his favorite target with him, 70 receptions, over 1,200 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So I have my eyes on how those guys translate to Oklahoma State. Now, there's only so much that you can really garner from them going up against the Oklahoma State defense, but it will be interesting to see how they do, especially once the football season rolls around. Then we've got defensive tackle James Smith going from Alabama to Ohio State. An added bonus here, just a few other guys actually that I kind of have my eyes on for the Buckeyes. Edge Quay Rasaw, also from Alabama, and then safeties Earl Little Jr. from Florida State and Terry Moore from Duke. Smith racked up 28 tackles, 6.5 for loss, and 2.5 sacks for the Crimson Tide. So my question here is, how does he plug in after the departure of Caden McDonald, who's going to be an NFL draft pick? And how will the Ohio State offensive line look blocking against him? That's going to be a matchup April 18th at noon, this Saturday at noon. That's going to be interesting to watch. And I really like the additions of Little and Moore, especially Moore. I think Moore was a little bit of an underrated player. You got, I think, Chandler Rivers, the cornerback for Duke. And obviously those Blue Devils, they got to an ACC championship game. So that was a really good Duke team. I kind of figured that they could be decent this year. I think as the season went along, it didn't look like they were likely to get there, but they found a way to get there and play against Miami. So I think those are really good additions, and Earl Little was a really good defensive back for Florida State. Then another defensive lineman is edge Prince Will Umanmielen for going from Ole Miss, to LSU. There is no spring game for the Tigers. There was a media observed spring practice last Saturday, and then practices are running until April 24th. Umanmielen, to me, is probably the best defensive player to transfer in this window. He had 44 tackles, 13 for loss, 9 sacks, and an interception. So the question here, how does he bolster that LSU defense? They were pretty good last year. They had their struggles, but they were 15th in scoring defense, 25th total, and he's also going to be joined by fellow Ole Miss transfer linebacker TJ Daugherty. To me, get your popcorn out for Umanmielen against offensive tackle Jordan Seaton, the transfer from Colorado. If you haven't, had a chance, I don't know if there will be really a chance to see these guys go up against each other too much in terms of like a televised setting, but I think both of those guys can only make each other better. Seaton was a really good tackle for the Buffaloes, and then obviously Umanmielen, one of the top defensive linemen, top defensive players really in the country last year. Then looking at the defending champions for Indiana, they've got some exciting offensive additions, and they've also got a couple of guys on defense that maybe I'll talk about later. But you got Josh Hoover, quarterback for TCU, and then wide receiver Nick Marsh coming in from Michigan State. Hoover threw for over 9,600 yards, 71 touchdowns, and 33 interceptions in kind of some injury. I think he dealt with some injuries, some injury-riddled years with the Horned Frogs. 4 years he spent in Fort Worth. And then you got Marsh, who had exactly 100 receptions for 1,311 yards and only 9 touchdowns in his 2 years for the Spartans. So that's certainly something that I think you could almost expect to see him hit that in this season alone. And both of these guys, though, do have big shoes to fill. You got Hoover coming in for Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Fernando Mendoza, the number 1 overall draft pick. And then you got Marsh coming in for Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt. He does have Charlie Becker coming back as well, and that'll help. That'll help for Hoover. I mean, it's going to be all about just kind of finding that connection between these guys, and they'll have a little bit of time to get into it with these spring practices as well. Their spring game isn't until next Thursday, April 23rd. It'll be 8 p.m. on Big Ten Network. Then we got quickly kind of a segment here I'm calling the quarterback, the QB buffet, because obviously the biggest impact position that I think you can have, except for maybe on the defensive side, either like a quarterbacking safety, if you know what I mean by that term, somebody who runs the defense, or a linebacker, or maybe just a pure game wrecker on the edge. Obviously, the most impactful position is at quarterback, and there's a lot of guys, as per usual in this transfer era, who have made moves. You got Brendan Sorsby going from Cincinnati to Texas Tech, the number 2 transfer quarterback, number 2 transfer overall, I think, according to 24/7 Sports, behind Sam Leavitt. Their spring game, if you want to tune into that, Texas Tech, again, I mean, they made all those additions last year, were able to get the Big 12 championship, get to the college football playoff before falling to Oregon. Their spring game is going to be Saturday at 7 p.m. Then you got DJ Lagway going from Florida to Baylor. The question here is, can Lagway have a homecoming resurgence for the Bears? He's not from Waco, I don't think, but I know he's from Texas, so he's going back to his home state. The Bears don't really have a spring game. They have what's called a Fan Fest. That'll be next Saturday, April 25th at 11 a.m. So that'll be interesting to watch. Can he kind of overcome that sophomore slump and play better for the Bears this season? And then maybe he could stick around there, but I think if Lagway has a really good season, I could see him going back to a Big Ten or SEC school, likely SEC, to kind of stay in his area of the country. So I think that'll be interesting to watch for him. Then I think this is one of the most underrated transfers. It went under the radar last year. It's Darian Mensah going from Duke to Miami. He threw for almost 4,000 yards, 3,973, 34 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions in one season with the Blue Devils after transferring from Tulane. The question here is, can Mensah be the one to get the Canes over the hump and win that national title? Because they were the team that got the closest outside of the team that did it, Indiana. They were the team that got the closest. I mean, they were a touchdown away from doing it. I think it's even back going through the national championship recap, it's easy to forget that Miami had the ball and a chance to not only tie, but to win at the end of that game before a late interception by Indiana. Carson Beck had that team driving. So Mario Cristobal has the Hurricanes in the right spot, and Darian Mensah, I think, is the type of quarterback that can take that and continue what was achieved last year and maybe even get a national title. Rocco Becht going from Iowa State to Penn State. The question here is, can the Becht and Campbell connection work in Happy Valley? They accomplished a lot in Ames, getting the first 10-win season ever in Cyclones program history. They're also bringing wide receiver Chase Sowell along with them from Iowa State to Penn State. The spring game for the Nittany Lions will be more of an open practice. It's next Saturday, the 25th at 1 p.m. Finally, one that I would call really a diamond in the rough, and part of this might just be because I got the fortune of seeing him play in person. It's Malachi Marshall transferring from NJCAA powerhouse, JUCO powerhouse, Iowa Western to Florida State. He's a talented gunslinger. He is really good at throwing a deep ball, good at moving around in the pocket. He's a talented quarterback who led the Reavers to that JUCO national title, winning Offensive Player of the Year in the process, throwing for over 2,700 yards, 33 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions. And I also really like the addition of running back Trey Wisner coming in from Texas. I'm not sure completely if Marshall will start. I think Wisner is definitely a likely option to start. Finally, one other segment in terms of positions, what I'm calling the edge of glory. These are three impact transfers who can really impact their teams and kind of rank in that top 25 or 30 of the top transfers. You got Chaz Coleman going from Penn State to Tennessee. Then you got Damon Wilson II going from Missouri to Miami. This is a big one, I think, even more than that one to Tennessee, though the Volunteers have had some good defensive linemen to replace recently. But at Miami, you're obviously replacing Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, two absolute terrors on the defensive line for opposing teams. So can Wilson kind of step in and fill those shoes? Finally, Toby Osunsamni is going from Kansas State to Indiana. He is going to be going in there to try to bolster that defensive line of the reigning national champions. Guys like Mikhail Kamara, even Aiden Fisher at linebacker, he'll be trying to kind of recreate what some of those guys did. Finally, this could be a video in itself because I think the LSU transfer portal class, non-surprisingly, is probably the best in the country. I mean, it's rated as such by 24/7 Sports, so not really going to find much argument from me saying otherwise. But this one is a little bit more of a wait and see. I mentioned Sam Levitt at the beginning of the video. He's coming in from Arizona State. He's, I would say, the most impactful transfer of the window, but right now he is recovering from that Lisfranc surgery. The question here is, how does he fit into the Lane Kiffin offense? Will he be able to achieve what other quarterbacks, what Trinidad Chambliss did, or will he, and will he be able to kind of achieve, what he did for the Sun Devils? The quarterbacks who have been playing had what the Daily Advertiser in Baton Rouge called a rough day. That's Landon Clark and USC transfer Husan Longstreet at LSU's Media Observed spring practice on Saturday. So again, talking about this LSU offense, again, this is a little bit more of a wait and see, especially in regards to Levitt, but it is going to be interesting to see how he, along with Jordan Seaton, offensive tackle, that'll be able to protect him, And then wide receiver Eugene Wilson, the third from Florida, put up some good numbers for the Gators this past year. The Tigers have 3 of the top 5 transfers in the portal this year, according to 24/7 Sports. That's Levitt, Seaton, and Uman Mielen. So that'll be something I could probably dive into in a later video in this offseason. I know this video has gone on for a little bit, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the content and enjoyed having me back. It was fun to put together kind of the script for this video, and I'm looking forward to maybe giving kind of my observations kind of from a national perspective, maybe after Saturday's spring games that we're getting, and then the following week after we get some further spring games and really get spring practices wrapped up. But that is all for this episode of College Football Talk. Thank you so much if you've taken the time to watch this video and for being patient with me while I just kind of had a little bit of time off. Hopefully soon I will be upgrading in here. I know, this is filmed out of my garage, so hopefully we'll get some upgrades in here soon. I know I promised that last time. Haven't really had the chance to, but I do expect to in the near future. But again, that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.